Hi there. Welcome to Prices at the Pumps, our weekly look at all things energy related right here on SaltWire. I'm Scott Squires, pleased to be joined as always by the energy expert Dan McTagg. Dan, a few things to talk about today, including a brand new segment that we're going to introduce later on in the show. But first things first, prices adjusted in the Atlantic region tomorrow, Thursday in Newfoundland and Labrador, and then the rest of the Atlantic region on Friday. What do you got for consumers? What's happening at the pumps over the next couple of days? Newfoundland first, and then the rest of the Atlantic region, Dan.
Well, thanks for that, Scott. And it looks like as we head into the Canada Day long weekend, it may be a nothing burger for the rest of North America, but for us here in Atlantic Canada, a bit of an increase, about 3 cents a litre for Newfoundland and about a 1 cent decrease for diesel. So if you're looking to fill up, you may want to do that Wednesday, today, and not wait until Thursday because prices will in fact be going up. Not a lot, but not going in the right direction. As for diesel, hold off until tomorrow. Same for heating oil, should you happen to need it. For the rest of Atlantic Canada, similar situation, up about 2.5 cents a litre for gasoline. We still have another trading day before they set their prices for Nova Scotia, PEI, and New Brunswick. But safe bet that they will go up as well come Friday, with diesel not moving much, perhaps coming down a half a penny. Now, of course, all this is to do with the first week of a big driving season. So when you consider that prices were a little more expensive this year than last year, it puts things in perspective. We're looking at about a 4 cent difference between this year and last year. Unfortunately for consumers, a little higher than it was this time last year.
And Dan, that covers the Atlantic region, but it's always interesting as well to find out what prices are like across the rest of the country. I was up for a few days vacation in your neck of the woods, Toronto, last week, noticing just different prices at all the stations, and they change each day, which is a bit of a different thing to notice. Where here in Atlantic Canada, they're basically set weekly. But heading into the Canada Day long weekend, what are prices like across the rest of the country? You know, is there somewhere that's really, really high? Is there somewhere that's a little lower? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, we do averages across the rest of the country because there's a lot of competition. Gas stations can drop gas prices 9 cents a litre overnight. We often know when that's going to happen. So that's a real advantage to consumers. We also give predictability so that people know day to day whether you fill up today or tomorrow or the next day. But if you look in Quebec, $1.74, $1.75, both for Quebec City and for Montreal. Some places a little cheaper. If you're looking at Ontario, 164, 165 is the number that we're working on. And if you're looking, the best place to buy gasoline in the country is Manitoba because they have no provincial sales tax, which has been temporarily suspended. So $1.35 for fuel in Winnipeg. If you're in Saskatchewan, still $1.52. Alberta, still $1.45 to $1.49 roughly. The interior BC, central BC, you're about $1.75. And if you are in Vancouver or listening to us from Vancouver, hold off until tomorrow because gas prices there drop a stupendous 7 cents a litre from 189.9 down to 182.9. So the highest price for fuel in Canada is, of course, Vancouver, with Atlantic Canada coming a close second, within about 10 cents a litre.
Dan, always interesting to know what prices are across the country. But now as you look at global markets, what's happening, with OPEC? What's happening with the price of a barrel of oil on the world markets? What are you seeing? You always like to talk about the fundamentals, right? What's happening right now, and where are you seeing oil headed in the short term, barring any kind of major geopolitical event?
Well, we saw back at the beginning of the month a ridiculous response by energy traders who really aren't energy traders. They're basically money managers. They use AI and all sorts of other weird devices to make decisions and bets, trade off because they weren't getting their, U.S. Fed decrease in interest rates. So we saw oil sell off from $80 a barrel down to 73. It's right back to $80 a barrel. But we're going to continue to see this struggle where, a combination of ignoring fundamentals is going to keep oil and gasoline prices in check. We're also going to see evidence, I think, very clearly of what could be really troubling data collection by the Department of Energy, the EIA in the US, continues to show builds in oil when in fact the following week and others, analysts are saying that's not true. They're including all sorts of things that have nothing to do with oil. It's sending really a false message as to fundamentals, supply and demand. And that's great for consumers in the short term. But as we've said many times, this is going to correct itself. And there could be some pretty unpleasant surprises. For now, no hurricanes in the U.S. Gulf Coast, no, refinery issues to speak of. Oil seems to be trading again in the $80 a barrel range. And that means that the foreseeable prices for the summer, at least for the next few weeks, is going to be relatively stable, maybe to the downside, unless any of those events should occur. Breakdown of a refinery, suddenly hurricanes in the U.S. Gulf Coast, home to 50% of all fuel production in the U.S., anything like that, or more geopolitical tensions. Apparently, the geopolitical tensions we see here in the Middle East just aren't enough to spark the market to think there's a problem. I think that they're whistling past their own graves.
And Dan, of course, right here on Prices at the Pumps for a long time, we've been talking about the energy sector and oil markets and all of those things, home heating oil, gas, diesel, etc. But we also talk about electric vehicles and EVs because that's a big part of the energy sector. Is this push to net zero in Canada, this mandate to have all new vehicle sales be electric by 2035? And we talk about this all the time, right? What it means, what it's going to cost to upgrade the grid and all of these things. And something interesting the other day, a video was posted, and I'll just read a little bit of the post, and then I'm going to play some of the video for you, and then I'll get your reaction off the back of what I'm about to play. But it was posted, and it says, reps from the automotive sector are painting quite the picture today. And I'll play you some of what was said by these representatives of the automotive sector about EVs and electrification, net zero, etc.
Today, we are calling for the same alignment when it comes to Canada's environmental policies. Just 6 months ago, the federal government finalized its zero-emission vehicle sales mandate, dictating an increasing ratio of EV sales in Canada. The mandate requires 100% sales by 2035. In the first quarter of 2024, EV sales were responsible for 11.3% of total vehicle sales in Canada. Achieving the government's mandated sales targets depends on Canada's environmental policies working in conjunction with our industrial policy. This is not the case today. An unprecedented national effort to build charging infrastructure, expand the electricity grid, increase clean electricity production, and help more Canadians switch to electric is urgently required. According to the federal government's analysis of the EV mandate, the incremental costs of purchasing EVs and home chargers is estimated at $54.1 billion. Installing the required public charging infrastructure is estimated to cost an additional $20 billion. For context, this amount is twice Canada's annual spending on national defense. In addition, Canada will need significantly more clean electricity generation and grid capacity to support a growing electric vehicle fleet. In Ontario alone, decarbonizing the electricity system will cost between $375 billion and $425 billion. According to a BCG study, utilities will need to invest between $1,700 and $5,800 US for every electric vehicle added to the vehicle fleet. These are eye-watering figures that have not been budgeted or planned for in the development of the federal mandate. The countdown to 2035 unveiled today illustrates how little time we have to prepare for an all-electric vehicle fleet. If there is any hope of meeting the mandated sales targets established by the government, urgent action is required now.
So, a lot there to unpack. Big numbers. Hundreds of billions of dollars. Even in Ontario alone, he talked about the massive amount of money. We've talked about this, Dan, and you don't hear a lot of the current government talking about these numbers associated with this big push for electrification and net zero and et cetera. You were an MP for 18 years. What do you make of that, and what would you say?
Nuts. Absolutely ridiculous. Look, the automotive companies went all in on this stuff, believing that this change had to happen. They put their money behind it, provided the taxpayer put even more money behind it. And now that we're getting there, they realize that this is not a goal that is going to be attainable. Number one, yeah, it's nice to say 11% of your sales were in 2023 were electric vehicles. Try that now. They'd be lucky to say it's 6%. And we're talking about 11% increase of 2% of the market. So we're, barely moving the needle. And now we're talking about committing trillions of dollars. Ontario alone, look what he said, $500 billion for clean electricity. Got news for the folks in the automotive sector. We already have it. We've had nukes, and we have natural gas, and we have hydro. And that provides us about 95, 98% of all the electricity we generate. So if you think you can somehow squeeze more out of this particular set of electricity energy creation on the energy side, you're dreaming Technicolor. We don't have coal generation. We don't have oil generation. It's all clean to begin with. What this really talks about is the folly of having pursued a fantasy and tell people you have to drive these vehicles by 2035 or else these, pie in the sky mandates coming down from above. It does resonate, I think, with people who are now finally saying enough is enough. Look, Scott, I bite my tongue at not trying to be partisan, but there's a reason that one of the safest liberal ridings in the country fell on Monday. And there's no doubt that the connection between affordability and the ludicrous policies being pursued by this government and obviously adopted by grifters who will only act if they can get money. They're now saying not only is the infrastructure not ready, look what Ford did, Volvo. There's many others now joining up and saying, unless you can demonstrate that we can actually make money building these units, we're not building them. I have a YouTube video on Canadians for Affordable Energy I did 3 weeks ago at the Oakville plant. Been shuttered. No one's working there anymore, except for people cleaning up and doing whatever they have to do, remediation. But the reality is that it's supposed to reopen in 2027. Ford's now saying, no, we're just not doing this. Unless someone has a great plan, that plant's going to remain shuttered. Let's go with the technology that works. Let's not try to beat ourselves over the head. If we're talking Ford, 20 years ago, the average vehicle was a 5-liter F-150. The same vehicle, or even 6.2 liter, the same vehicle runs now in a 2.7 or even a 3.5 EcoBoost. Same power, same output. Technology will continue to improve. But if someone believes that building electric vehicles is somehow a solution to climate and it is not dirty, invasive, and will require the world use 300 times more mineral extraction, which is extraordinarily dirty, especially if it comes from places like China, you can imagine that this is really a flight of fantasy. And people need to get their heads out of the sand because I can tell you, you're being pickpocketed alive. And the affordability issue, if you think it's bad now, you ain't seen nothing yet, as long as grifters and bad policy tend to combine. And this is unfortunately very bad public and industrial policy. It should be scrapped altogether. We should proceed not with mandates, but with changes as they happen and as technology and engineering and improvements allow us to do those things. Until then, government should get out of the way and allow these industries to continue to perform in the ways that they have in the past without having to pickpocket every poor Canadian taxpayer in this country.
And Dan, interesting that we're 11 years away from 2035, this mandate to have all new vehicle sales be EVs. 11 years might seem like a long time, but it's really not when you're talking about the planning and the type of things that we heard in that clip a few minutes ago. And the pushback now quite publicly from the automotive sector, could this potentially now open up the floodgates for maybe other sectors, other groups to push back and to come out and maybe say some of the things as well that people may not want to hear, but they have to hear? What are your thoughts on that?
People got to stop being trendy. I mean, this is ridiculous. I took a Tesla a few minutes ago. It's a nice car and everything like that. It's a Tesla 3. They're focused on software, not hardware, because you don't know how to build a car. Look, I think people have to understand that there are things we want to do. Those are the so-called, stretch goals that we're looking for. Those are the inspirational goals that we are trying to get. But the practical goals have to also be achieved, and that's to make sure that we find that balance. We have gone so far down one direction that we've forgotten that we can't make these things work without infrastructure. And we're a province and we're a country that understands energy infrastructure perhaps better than most countries around the world, top 10 anyways. But to have imposed and saddled some political objective, some empirical political objective to boast and to have bragging rights at international fora on, climate makes no sense. It's destroying the Canadian economy. It's rendering most Canadians much poorer than they were. Our standard of living is cratering. And for us to think that we can wave around a couple $1 trillion that we can give to meet a goal that at the end of the day may not be worthy of pursuing is, in my view, a very, very dangerous pursuit. and it is one that is going to lead to the deconstruction of the country, its financial undoing, not to mention disintegration on a social basis as governments no longer have money for social programs. I think we need a sober discussion, and we need Canadians at the ordinary level, families that talk about these problems, say, I don't like where this country is going. This will only accelerate that direction in a direction that I think no Canadian wants.
Dan, always great to be able to have your insights and to get your views on that. This kind of stuff you've been dealing with, talking about, immersed in for a long, long time. So it's great to have your expertise and insights here to talk about these things that are very important to Canadians and consumers and families, as you said. And now, I talked about it earlier, I teased it earlier, we're introducing a brand new segment here on Prices at the Pumps called Ask the Expert. That's you, Dan. So here we go. We're going to transition into the very first of many, Ask the Expert. Okay, Dan, this question comes from one of our audience members. It's Jerry in Cole Harbour. And Jerry is asking this question: what do you think of the hydrogen engine? What kind of an impact will it have? And do you think they'll be coming into use anytime soon? Again, that's from Jerry in Cole Harbour. Thanks for the question, Jerry.
Great question, Jerry. And I think we will see some degree of hydrogen vehicles as a part of many types of vehicles offered. There are many. We're studying this and working on this for many years. I remember as a member of Parliament, the money that the federal government expended to help Ballard fuel cells generated very much by hydrogen. The promise is certainly there. Unfortunately, for every unit of energy that is provided by hydrogen in an engine, it takes 2 energy units to create that. So it's not as efficient. There's also concerns about hydrogen. Let's not be, pedantical about this, but hydrogen is not exactly an involatile product. And so it depends how we make it, how the resources we need to produce it. And it comes down to, as well, an issue of cost and efficiency. It sounds great on paper, but there's a little thing called physics and chemistry that also interfere. And as I said, we've used hydrogen in applications with diesel trucks to reduce the amount of smog that they would otherwise create. And so, Jerry, I think it's a little further off, but it may very well find itself somehow mixing into the menu of all the various types of options that we have in terms of the future, future engines of vehicles. But it does suggest that it's not just EVs now. Hydrogen is there. Plug-in photovoltaic, plug-in, hydrogen, hybrids are also there. I think in the next 20 years, we're going to see vehicles that might have, 4 or 5 different choices. Hydrogen will be one of them, but it certainly won't be one that I think is going to take root for quite some time.
Thanks for your insights on that. And thank you again to Jerry in Cole Harbour for that great question. And we're excited to have this segment now each week on Prices at the Pumps. You can certainly look at the posts that I put out on social media. Same thing, Dan. I know you got lots of engagement. Anybody wants to answer a question respectfully, put the question in, say you'd like it answered on Prices at the Pumps, and we'll do our very best to get your question or questions on. And I don't know, what do you think, Dan? You like that segment? Is this a good one or what?
I love the segment. It's a great chance to hear from people, and let's do this again. Let's encourage people to get out there and ask the question. And again, as you said, respectful. But let's. There's a lot of good stuff out there, and I think there's having a discussion on these things does more than just having a couple of bureaucrats and folks out in the industry and maybe politicians talking about it. Let's hear from people who actually have to wind up using the stuff and paying for it.
Absolutely. You're locked in now, Dan. You've approved the segment, so that's it. You've given it the thumbs up. You're locked in, and I'll be looking at doing some fun things down the road, maybe even getting out on the street and getting some streeters from people and actually playing video of their questions, but all that to come down the road. But again, Ask the Expert, brand new segment here on Prices at the Pumps. And Dan, before we let you go, when you're not hanging out with us here on SaltWire, where can folks find you?
AffordableEnergy.ca. Of course, you can always get me at Gas Price Wizard on Twitter, and of course, President at AffordableEnergy.ca is probably the best way to interact on an email basis. Of course, if you really want to do it, ask one of those questions here on SaltWire, and we'll get the answer for you.
Absolutely, Dan. Thanks for your time as always. Enjoy the long Canada Day weekend ahead. I hope you have a wonderful time with family and friends, and we'll get back next Wednesday and do this again.
You bet. Happy Canada Day. Take care, Scott.
Thank you, Dan. Same to you. Bye-bye.